Hey everyone, I'm Chris Cassar, joined by my co-host Ray Negron, and this is the Book It or Release podcast. Ray and I wanted to produce a podcast that deals with our profession of production, post-production, advertising, and everything in between. Book it or release is a production scheduling phrase. A producer will contact a production studio and put time on hold to work on the specific project. That time is on hold by the producer until it's either booked or released. So a studio manager will eventually call that producer at some point, looking for the producer to either book it or release it, hence the name of the podcast. Between Ray and myself, we have a combined 50 years in this business, and our goal is to have an open and honest discussion about our industry and discuss how the current pandemic is affecting everything. We also want the opportunity to have conversations with other people in the business to see what they're up to, how COVID is affecting them and their families. The intention was to make the first couple of episodes about Ray, myself, and our professional journey, just to give you context for our future conversations. And we actually have over an hour of content in the can. That was our plan. But as we all know, life sometimes throws a wrench into the works, and life definitely threw a huge wrench in this week. This week, we lost a former employer and, more importantly, a friend. This week, Peter Fish passed away. Now, if you're listening to this podcast, you're probably in the production industry. And if that's the case, then you already know who Peter is. For those who don't know Peter, he was one of the most talented composers, producers, musicians, and studio owners I've ever had the pleasure of working with and for. So Ray and I felt it was fitting to dedicate the first episode of our podcast to the memory of Peter Fish. So Ray, Peter, let's talk about him. Please share some thoughts.
Let's talk about him. What can we say? What can't we say? Peter was a very creative, musically person that just sounds ironic how I'm going to say it, but he was always on key, right? Always on key, always very knowledgeable in what he wanted to do. He was good at his craft, man. I've never seen, it was my first introduction in a post studio working for a composer that so happens to, have responsibility of owning a studio or running a studio creatively and being part of that. It was my first introduction to that world that I knew nothing about. And watching him, I began to learn what his responsibility was to broadcast TV, because a lot of the stuff I saw him work on was, CBS, A&E, anything possible, MTV, it was just a lot of things in the industry. Yeah. These in the 90s. So TV was the thing. It was before, internet streaming and any of that stuff. So TV was it.
Yeah.
But he was.
And I was just going to say, and to build on what you were just saying, my degree is in music composition. So to watch somebody like Peter do what he does better than anybody else I've ever seen, it wasn't even a matter of like absorbing what he was doing. It was almost as if just trying to keep up with what he was doing. He moved so quickly. He created so quickly, and like it was as if he was in a musical matrix where he knew everything going on around him. He knew what he wanted to do. He probably even saw the final product even before he even started composing. So to see somebody like that, as good as they are doing what they do, I mean, just inspiring is one of the words I would use to describe him.
I can't imagine. I don't know what that is, right? I don't know what that is, being creative that way, to be so far ahead. I heard Jeff Kreiner say, he was the head of CBS marketing. Right? Jeff Kreiner was CBS marketing.
Yeah, he was director of the news advertising and promotion department.
Okay, yeah. So What that was tons and tons of spots that had to be generated and with different type of producers. It wasn't just one producer, it was several producers. And to be able to manage 5 or 6 or 7 producers, their vision of what they wanted to put on tape to go along with the music that Peter created for all that was amazing in itself because each one was uniquely different.
Yeah. Oh my God, without a doubt. And not only that. So just a quick story in regards to one of the projects he worked on. So he did the music for the CBS morning show where he took the song "A Beautiful Morning" by the Rascals. Now, he did like a full 2-minute version of that song and for, I guess, their regular open, but then CBS would need multiple versions of this song, for promos or radio spots or whatever, or, just like intros and outros to segments that they would work on. So Peter not only created a 2-minute version, he created he created as many versions as there were seconds. So he did a 2-minute version. He did a 1 minute 59-second version, all the way down to 3 seconds. It wasn't even like a fade out. It was like he created a whole new song with that timing, ending exactly when he wanted it to end. And it's just, it just gives me chills thinking about how he was able to do that.
By watching, I learned, like I began to understand what his job was. It just wasn't to create music. It was more than that. He needed to see the visual of what that producer was putting on visually. And he had to sort of take from them and then become that. And he would do that all the time. And it amazed me because he did it with so many different people. So many different type of brands, as we call them now, but different type of networks. He did it for everyone. And it was a constant thing. And like you said, sometimes he would have a couple of rooms going.
Oh yeah. Oh my goodness.
He would run from room to room and I would see that happen. And his engineer at that time, Peter didn't mix his own things. Right. So at that time, he would have 3 to 4 guys that would always, he would have an order of who he wanted to work on what.
Yeah.
If one wasn't available, we had to try our hardest to get that person. Obviously, the job of a scheduler is you have to manipulate everything that goes on because you see the entire board. You see everything that goes on in each room. So you have to know what's deadline driven, what can wait, what could be pushed, what can't be pushed, who you could ask. Sometimes we had to, and back then we used to do scheduling with a pencil, with these big white pieces of paper. And we would do that. And a lot of it would be Peter, hey, I need this, this, and this. And we had to rearrange it.
Oh yeah.
But I took his dedication to his craft. I got that from him as well. Once, as we spoke before that, I didn't know anything when I walked into National, right? I just walked in as a job, taking it. But once I started learning, I took his approach to it.
Mm-hmm.
Like I no longer looked at a schedule and just looked at one room. Now I looked at a schedule. I saw 10 people, 10 different things, all do different times. How do you manipulate that?
And you were probably able to, from working with Peter for so long, predicting what he would need, knowing, this bar that is so high that he has set just by himself, looking at the schedule, knowing that he's going to need this, that the clients he's working with are going to need this and that, and just up your game just by being around him and knowing him.
I never learned that. I always thought that when you came into something, you had to know what it was, right? Obviously, the way it was then and the way it is now, 2 different things, right? Back then, people were able to train you, right? You followed someone. I followed multiple people. The way Peter worked with his music, the way Lisa was able to catch her staff's attention with very little words and getting to her point. Learning all that from them, that's the way you pick up on things before they even happen.
Yeah.
As time goes on. But Peter was always on point. Like there was nothing like, I remember Jeff telling me one time, he goes, Ray, I just tell him I'm giving him something. Sometimes he already has, I give him 2 blurbs of what's on picture. He already has an idea of what he's doing. That also comes with time and working with people. But Peter was notorious for that. He was always good for that.
Yeah,
always,
he's incredible.
Always. His musical sense was great.
Oh, second to none. I mean, again, one of the most talented musicians, composers I've ever known, And
again, like you said, you went to school for that. There's a lot of stuff I didn't learn until I get to national, music-wise.
Same here. Again, I have my degree, and yet Peter was doing things that, just blew my mind. Blew my mind away.
There's so many artists that I didn't know, because I was stuck in a certain genre. I was stuck in R&B, slow jams, and stuff like that.
Can you name some of the artists that you remember he worked with? He was producing albums for people that you probably haven't heard of, in a long time, but I guess Peter connected with them, or they knew of Peter and they wanted his input on their album. So he did an album for Judy Collins, which was really, really good. He worked with Rick Derringer, did a whole album with him, which was fantastic. Edgar Winter came in and was working with Peter. I mean, you're talking like classic rock gods, and they wanted Peter to work with them. And it was just so cool to see him working with these guys. Like, wow, man, that's my boss working with Rick Derringer. That's nuts.
I think my one time that I was really not starstruck in that sense, I was taken aback years later after the fact. Chris Bodie was one of the guys that would come into the studio. Years later, Chris Bodie comes out with these albums. And I'm like, I called Peter one day. I was like, Pete, I just bought this album from Chris Bodie. He goes, you remember him? He would come into the studio. I'm like, it was him. So I wasn't, I'd just be like, I didn't know, I was used to regular guys coming in and all that stuff.
Beyond what we watched him do at National and what you witnessed him doing through the years at Tonic and the other places you guys worked at, like I was home one night, I'm watching TV, and I think it was The Apprentice that I was watching. And I think the job for the celebrity, it was Celebrity Apprentice, and the job for the celebrity was to create a music jingle for a show. And so, you got Bret Michaels of Poison doing his own thing, and then I forget what celebrity was in the next segment, but there is in the background playing keyboards, working with the celebrity, Peter Fish. I'm like, I turned to my wife. I'm like, that's my own boss. He's on Celebrity Apprentice.
The ironic thing that was done at Audio Engine.
No kidding! Wow,
I didn't know that till after the fact. Yeah, it was at Audio Engine. He did that.
Yeah, so I at that moment I felt I had to reach out to him. I literally, picked up my computer. I sent him an email. I'm like, "Wow, I just saw you on TV, looking great as always. Music sounds awesome." Just praising him up and down. I get an email back. Thanks, Chris.
It's funny how someone that was so energetic, like if he was on stage, whenever he performed with his group, he was so energetic and so, I always say that the piano was his divine. He had rhythm from the waist up.
Yeah.
Because his shoulders would be in tune.
Yeah. Oh, and he would always have like a snarl on his face while he's playing. I remember the face he would make as he's like really digging in.
Like you didn't really know if his eyes were open or closed.
Right.
Because he would just be like, and all into it. But if you look below the keyboard, not that anybody would, but if you did, which I did because I would joke on him all the time, I go, You're still doing the two-step under the goddamn piano because you couldn't get him on a dance floor. That wasn't going to happen.
Yeah, I don't think I've ever seen him dance.
No. I mean, he went to my wedding and he sat the whole night, even though we tried to get him up.
Sure.
And stuff like that. But the dude was amazing. The dude was overall, like anybody else, everybody had their bad days. But he had a lot of responsibilities also.
Yeah, he had a lot of people that he was, in charge of, a lot of careers on the line. Yeah.
Yeah, the weight on his shoulders was a lot. He was able to handle it. I mean, from my perspective, he was always able to handle it. But that also was a testament to him because he put people in the right places.
Right. He recognized talent and he placed them appropriately.
They did a good job of putting the right people in place and so on and so forth. And bottom line is that's what led to the next 13 years or 14 years of our relationship, that no matter where he went, I tagged along with him. He always brought me along.
Yeah.
Between him and Lisa, they brought me along. And it was such an honor to see that man grow as a person, because everybody, you never stop growing. You shouldn't stop growing. I think you always got to learn. You always got to learn new things. And, until recently, Peter was happy. I remember about a year ago we spoke, and he's like, I'm mixing my own stuff now. I'm even getting into editing. And I was like, who are you? You needed an engineer. You weren't doing it yourself,
Right.
But, everybody gets to learn and everybody gets to move on and grow. And I think Peter grew. And until recently that he moved out to LA as well, he was rejuvenated.
Yeah.
So rejuvenated that you could hear it in his voice. I spoke to him a few times, and I even spoke to him, I even asked him, would you ever run a company again? Would you ever go down that road to try to open up a company again? He was like, fuck no.
Oh, no.
No. It's different times also.
Yeah.
It's different times how things change. And he saw that change. And, listen, it's good to realize what you can and cannot do, right? And I was surprised. But Peter has definitely left an impression in this business, has definitely left an impression in the whole post-production world. Because as big as it may seem, especially in New York, it's really small.
Yeah, without a doubt. Everybody knows everybody, and with him gone, he's leaving a huge chasm, that I don't know if could be filled. Yeah. Certainly not by one person.
No.
Not the way he was able to do it. So like the loss of Peter is definitely going to be felt by the industry without question.
I think it has already. Yeah, I definitely agree with you. It's definitely left a void for me because of the friendship and the ability to grow with him. One thing in life people say that we don't control is when we're ready to check out. It's not for us to decide.
Right.
And he checked out. It was his time. He came in, he left an impression in this world, and he left an impression on tons of people. And you're right. There's probably a void that's not going to be. There's not going to be another Peter Fish.
No.
And I don't think even if there was, we're not going to see him.
No.
Because we know who Peter was. I was fortunate to know who he was in the business sense and in the personal. And that in itself, was great for me. But he had tons of friendships that also, whatever impression he left on them, God only knows what their stories are. And there got to be great stories there and great memories.
Yeah. Well, and because of his impact on the industry and his impact on people that he had around him and friends and coworkers, he's not going to be forgotten, not anytime soon. So he will live on through everything that he has done and the person that he was. And even though I haven't seen him in a while, I'm going to miss him.
Yeah.
I'm sad he's gone.
he was a good man overall.
Yep.
He left a good impression. And I will say a huge thank you to Peter. And thank you for everything. Thank you for having me around. Thank you for letting me into your personal life as much as your business life. And here we are. We're here to say thank you.
You know,
I think that's the easy way we could put it.
Yeah, and I think that is the perfect way to end this first episode, you know, with a big thank you to Peter Fish for everything he's taught us.
Yeah, I think you're right. I think that's exactly what we could do. There's not much we could say. There could probably be tons of stuff that we can, but...
And we might eventually touch on it as the shows go on.
At some point, but a big thank you to him for introducing me to this world, for introducing me to the people that he introduced me to, and for the people, some of these people are still in my life because of his introduction. And I'm forever, I always say it's an unpayable debt that I have, that I can never repay to Peter. And I'm glad for that. And I think all this is leading in that right direction when we've done our job. So I want to say thank you to everybody who listens to this. I want to thank you, Chris, for doing this. And I think we booked this one.
I think you're right. We did not release.
We did not release this one. We booked it. And we put it to bed. So I think that's a good thing. So with that, I say good night. Thank you. And until the next show.
All right. See everybody later.